Are you ready to be the change? If so, you've come to the right place. You are about to join a movement of entrepreneurs who are empowering people, saving the planet, and turning their passion into profits while creating the lifestyle of their dreams. If you don't believe us, check out our website at entrepreneursforachange.com, a place where you can be inspired, mentored, and supported by a tribe of change-making entrepreneurs just like you. Now, before diving into the interview, I want to encourage you to rate, review, and download Entrepreneurs for a Change on iTunes. This really helps us reach more people with inspiring stories of entrepreneurs who are changing the world. Also, if these stories inspire you to start a world-changing business of your own, head over to our website at entrepreneursforachange.com and download the Business Changemakers Toolkit to get a jumpstart today. Now on to the show. Hello, powerful change makers. This is Lorna Lee, host of Entrepreneurs for a Change, and we are on episode 58. Now, I have with us today Michael Trout, who is an expat, permaculture farmer / entrepreneur, eye-bleeding dyslexic, and visionary who has a simple but powerful idea for saving our planet, which he calls Foundups. Michael's going to share with us what Foundups are, how aspiring entrepreneurs can create Foundups of their own, and how you can tap into the power of perpetual crowdfunding to launch and grow your world-changing startup. Now, Michael is a crowdfunding veteran who's going to share with us the deadliest crowdfunding pitfalls in his masterclass, which you can download from the show notes on entrepreneursforachange.com/58. He will share with us his personal crowdfunding fail stories, what he learned, and what he advises for entrepreneurs who want to get into crowdfunding to do differently. So, Michael, thank you so much for being on the show. I'd love to, first of all, ask you who you are and how you got started with this innovative model for your business.
Well, I'm just an ordinary guy who got fed up of, living in the States. I had a job offer on Wall Street in 2004 to go and be a commodities broker at a little boutique firm. And I just said, you know what? Do I want to do this again? And I said, no, let's just go and leave and go to Japan. And that's what I did and started teaching English. And that was in 2004. And I've been very happy doing that. And in that time frame, I had the opportunity to sit back and kind of look at the world and what was going on with Occupy and all the problems and meditating on a solution and realizing that our planet is pretty well screwed up by us. And the underlying problem, I contend and I can prove and I can argue successfully, is our business model, which I call the startup business model. So the value proposition is this, is we can transform the startup into the Foundup. Maybe, just maybe, we can save our planet.
I'm a little confused. What is the problem with the startup business model, and how would that differ from the Foundup business model?
Okay, well, that's a good question. Well, if you look at, for example, climate change, everything that's driving climate change can be traced to innovation that was launched as a startup. And ultimately, what's happening is we have a model that was based on, it was put together in the early industrial century when we had this understanding that we thought the world was infinite. We thought resources were infinite. And we basically developed a business model that there's something called CAGR, compounded annual growth rate, that takes no appreciation of the limits to our planet, but only focuses on an exponential return on an investment. And ultimately, you could, just as, I don't know if you've read the book The Selfish Gene, you could probably easily argue we could argue that the startup is a selfish vehicle because it has the interests of a few investors over the interest of the planet, right? And it is, what's happened is the success of these startups has created millionaires, and they have their access to capital networks, and we now have runaway inequality because all the money is staying within these groups, and these groups get to launch their innovation, and it's all about feeding the return back to the investors. And if you look at, for example, the startup, about 70% of the ownership of the startup is of a few individuals, right? So we have massive inequality. We have massive, we talk about this, industrial production and everything else. I could go into all the different the problems. For example, we got 40% of our oceans now covered in plastic sludge. Well, none of these corporations, like for example Nestle, which makes $100 billion a year of water, right? Are they taking any responsibility in cleaning up our oceans? No, right? And it goes on and on and on. So as long as we have a selfish model, we can't usher in something that Jeremy Rifkin's or even I can't think of Jeff from conscious capitalism. It's going to be impossible for us to. It'd be impossible to usher in.
That's so sad.
Yep. It would be impossible to usher in what Jeremy Rifkin talks about is an empathic civilization. We can't have empathy built on a selfish business model. We just can't have it. And you have to understand that it is this selfish business model that puts the money into our politics. So all the money that's coming in and driving and buying away our presidents and buying away, taking away our civil liberties and everything else is coming from this underlining process, this model. So if we change this model, we can change everything. Imagine, for example, if corporations that we launch were forbidden to participate in politics, in lobbying. Well, in Foundups, when we, as a group of people, and you have to understand, when you've got something like Kickstarter raising $5 million for some widget, in essence, we could raise $5 million a month for providing free power to the people through solar, right? Can you imagine that? Like a global civilization of individuals coming together and putting as little as $1 or less a month in order to give away free power. Well, it's happening in Peru. Peru, for example, is giving away free power, free solar to its poor people because it's cheaper to do it that way. So our whole ideas of our business model right now is built on this startup model is fundamentally crashing the planet. That's my argument. So it's a hard sell to folks who basically live their life around startups because we see all these benefits. But if in the end of the day, which we currently have, is we have runaway climate change. The CO2 emissions is growing exponentially. We have runaway pollution. The amount of pollution going into our oceans and everything is growing exponentially. We have ice caps melting at an exponential rate. We have a runaway problem right now, and we have to stop it.
So how do Foundups address this problem? I'm not sure what the difference is between a startup and a Foundup. So can you share with us what the business model of a Foundup actually is?
So a Foundup, basically number one, startups deal with groups, individuals. It's hard to do a startup by yourself. You can't get into Y Combinator or any of the Techstars or anything else as an individual founder, correct? They do prefer to have a co-founder, but I did have a recent guest on my show, Henrik Zilmer, one of the co-founders of Air Help. He might be the founder or co-founder. In any case, he had a team of people that participated in Y Combinator, but I did ask him whether it's possible to be a solopreneur and participate in one of these accelerator programs, and he said, you can, but it's going to be a lot more work. Extremely rare. Yeah, it's extremely rare. I don't know of anyone. I mean, and even if there's some videos of Steve Blank and others where they are not Steve Blank, the other guy who founded Y Combinator, who talks about that. Well, Foundups is about a founder. A Foundup is a founder with an idea, right? So number one, we differ is you don't have to be an incorporated vehicle. You don't, because startups, if you're depending who you're talking to, for the most part, startups are incorporated vehicles. If you're talking to, for example, SBA, if you're talking to an investor, they're not going to invest in. It's very unlikely they're going to invest in your project unless it's an incorporated vehicle. Correct?
Yes, that would be the case. Yeah.
So Foundups are not focused on, number one, being an incorporated vehicle. In essence, think of it this way: is imagine Foundups Corp becomes your umbrella. So you, in essence, can use my or our status as a corporation, we're a C corporation, to launch your ideas. Now, that stage is not something you're going to worry about early on because you don't have anything, you don't have a product or anything else. But to keep in mind, imagine in the future that you don't need to incorporate because there's an umbrella right there for you. You don't need to file, to secure your IP because you have an organization that's going to do it for you and hold it for you on your behalf. And ultimately, as your idea or your project levels up and it becomes successful, then you just become a qualified subsidiary of that entity. So in essence, for example, let's look at, I don't know if you remember the startup called Advark. Advark was a Google startup. Actually, it was a bunch of Google expats who left Google, did Advark, then Google bought them for $40 million. And there's been a lot of projects like this in Google, and then the project fails. Well, they didn't fail because they all got shares of Google Corporation. So I want you to imagine in the future that you don't have to worry about any of the, imagine an open Google where you can just plug your idea into this open Google. You have an entire system framework for leveling up. So you think of it as just as you have Google Docs for writing your business plan, you have basically a free management system. You have a free system that allows you to buy and sell the equity that you have to other people. And what you have is a decentralized, and there's actually new software that just came out or is coming out this year called Ethereum, a decentralized platform that removes the middlemen. So you don't have, for example, the Kickstarter in crowdfunding or the PayPal in crowdfunding, where projects can happen as a community venture, where projects can actually level up and become part of a global, or what I call an open corporation that anyone could be part of. For example, anyone could be part of Foundups Corp for as little as $1, right? For it. And by becoming a part of our corporation, you get shares in our corporation. You get to use all the IP. I've introduced something called basically open products. So I've been testing new products called, for example, herb sweetener, where I teach you how to make it, a sweetener for replacing your high fructose corn syrup. And anyone can make it from herbs that you grow using GMO-free sugars, and you can sell it locally. And I want you to imagine, for example, a startup that becomes globally recognized herb sweetener that becomes like a Coca-Cola product, but this product is not made in plants around the world, but actually made and distributed locally. So imagine a Foundup is something that you just participate in without having to buy into it. Does that make sense? Okay, it's a new paradigm. It's kind of like me trying to describe Wikipedia to you before Wikipedia existed, when there was, the only thing we knew was MS Encarta. So you have to think of a Foundup is, number one, is decentralized. A Foundup is open, and the Foundup is bottom up. A startup, in contrast, is centralized. A startup is closed, and a startup is top down.
So what the Foundup sounds like to me, and I can only draw parallels from
Sure.
what I've seen in, the nonprofit ecosystem, for example. When you have a bigger nonprofit, like I believe, is it Earth Island Institute or, or the Foundation Center? Who was it? There are a number of organizations that serve as fiscal sponsors to smaller non-profit projects that haven't really gone to the stage of getting their 501c3 status. So what ends up happening is like the fiscal sponsor, the nonprofit fiscal sponsor, then is the vehicle through which all charitable contributions are made. Usually they will take a percentage of anywhere from 7 to 10% usually of the contributions, and then the rest goes to the project that is under that umbrella. So for me, Foundup sounds somewhat a lot like that too, like providing, central administrative services as well, like, in some cases like office, mail receiving, software, shared software, that kind of thing. Is that a good parallel?
Yes, but take away think of it this way our plan is to launch something called the Ethereum Play Foundups app, which will be similar, and right now I'm testing Foundups on Patreon because Foundups has never-ending crowdfunding. So it goes through different stages, from the idea of, hey, I got to secure a little money in order to secure some IP, to I need to secure money to launch my IPO, right? There's different stages. You go from the beginning, middle to development stage of your business. So we provide, the whole idea with Foundups is, yes, we provide you the operating framework. So just as, Google provides you, Gmail, provides you email, provides you PowerPoint. Well, there's a lot of things that we want to provide, like free crowdfunding, so there's no middlemen, there's no PayPal, there's no Kickstarter. We don't take any money out of the pay. To us, it's just a service we provide you, because ultimately our end goal is saving the planet, not making money off your crowdfunding, not making money off your, off your interaction or selling your vegetables to your community. We provide, and there's a lot of independent frameworks already out there called like the Open Farm or Open. There's an Australian network which is providing small farmers the ability to move their produce, for example. They don't take anything from that interaction, that transaction. So what we're trying to do is decentralize the startup and to open it up and to make it accessible to anyone. So there are no barriers, because right now to do a startup, there's so many entry barriers. Just the incorporating alone is an entry barrier. Finding those investors that will invest in it, well, we don't need them, because if we launch corporations that take 80% of their net profits and capital gains and reinvesting it back into our network of Foundups, then all of a sudden we've made them redundant. We've just killed the VC, killed the or not, I hate to use, I'm using a Nietzsche term there, right? We've just made them obsolete in the process. And that's what people don't realize, is that the current model is quickly becoming obsolete.
So how do you make money? If you're not taking a cut on the crowdfunding resources that pass through your platform, then, how do you guys stay profitable?
So our vision is this, is that I believe, unlike startups where 99% of startups fail, 99% of Foundups will succeed. Of those 99%, 1% may be Google's or Facebook's, right? There's no reason for them to roll out. There's no reason for them to become their own entity. So think of Foundups as kind of like an open Warren Buffett business model, where think of Foundups Corp as Warren Buffett saying, hey, let us secure we're open to any ideas. We're not going to pick and choose like Kickstarter. We're not going to pick and choose like Y Combinator or Techstars or anything else. Anyone can put their ideas on. We're launching something called Foundups FX, which is Foundups Extension, which is a valuation, validation, referral engine, and it's going to sit on all the browsers. So our autonomous engine is going to let using via social media decide what ideas are hot, right? What ideas have value. And as they raise in value, they actually earn something called Foundup dollars, which is, think of it as Bitcoin, right? And you'll be able to use these Foundup dollars to buy and sell. Now, what we do is we have kind of the way we make money is we become kind of like a Groupon. So imagine on our Foundups platform, we've got 1 million people doing Foundups, okay? And of those, we've got 1,000 trademarks. Now, what we do is we broker the deal to get the best discount for those trademarks, or we broker the deal to get the best cost for those patents, just like Groupon does. So we can discount, let's say a normal person costs you $500 to get that trademark done. We get it down to $300 because of volume. Ultimately, we take 20% of the cost savings that we provide. That's our business model. So we take that's just one of the ways. We have multiple ways to make money. And the other thing that will happen here is we become this massive IP holder. Imagine right now that if you have IP and if you don't have money, that IP is worthless to you because you can't defend it. There's no 600-pound gorilla protecting you. The first thing you do on our platform is when you raise your first $5,000, $10,000, is secure IP. You secure the trademarks, you secure whatever IP. What happens is we actually come in and are going to grab and secure IP before there's these big IP farms out there which are out there buying or trying to secure IP. But what the difference is as an entity, we're there to protect that IP that can be sold or resold. Again, we don't make any money out of this. It's kind of like, how does Google make money out of Google Docs? How do they make money out of Gmail? How do they make money out of all the different products? Those are services. Our end result is to launch open corporations that ultimately are going to choose on their own volition to stay part of us, because our business model is not don't be evil, is to be good. Because don't be evil just doesn't cut it anymore. So by us providing everything an entrepreneur needs, we believe that they will say, you know what, we want to stay part of the Foundup family. And as they become successful, instead of a few people deciding where does the 80% of the net profits go, because we believe 20% going to investors or whoever shared as profit is fair and reasonable. Imagine all of a sudden you have 80% of the net profits of Google or Facebook or whatever feeding back into the system, where instead of you have a few people or a foundation or an organization deciding where that money goes, that money is shared equally amongst all the lesser stakeholders that were responsible for generating those net profits, and then they decide where that money goes into which Foundups of their own choosing on our platform, on playfoundups.com or Play Foundups. So it's a business model that ultimately is selfless. That's why I call it the selfless Foundup, because ultimately we have a big crisis at hand, and if we don't take a massive step towards stopping it, there is not going to be a planet for us in the future. That's the simple fact. I don't know if you know the numbers. Did you see the recent? I just saw the recent was 40% of life on our planet has basically disappeared in the last 40 years. 40%.
Yeah. I recently heard the news that, like, essentially our wildlife loss, it was much more accelerated than we anticipated. So, yes, I truly believe, along, with the philosophies that the late Jeff Klein shared with me in our previous interview on conscious capitalism, that business really is a powerful transformative force in the world. So we can either use it for good, or we can use it for, ill, or in a destructive way, so to speak. So I'm all for using business as an unstoppable force for good. I think one of the challenges that a lot of purpose-driven, conscious business owners have is a lot of the motivation really does come from a saving the planet approach, which is, really commendable. But then, the big challenge is, profitability, like how to actually make it a for-profit business rather than a charitable endeavor. So I'm definitely intrigued by your model. Your ability to generate revenues for your overarching corporate entity through, discounts, for example. Do you have to be at a certain level of scale before any of those benefits actually come to your organization? So it sounds like to me, like, unless you have achieved certain economies of scale, the revenues that you'll get from bulk discounts may not be there.
Well, I mean, like I said, that's one business model, right?
Okay.
That's one of the revenue streams. Obviously there's actually multiple ones. The thing is let's just look at the numbers. If Google had launched as a Foundup, not as a startup, then $1 invested in Google in 1996 would return $1.65 million today. Okay, now imagine if as an investor I then had $1.32 million to choose where to put it. Where am I going to put this? Because that's the capital gains, right? 80% of the 1.65 million of that $1 that I put into Google. Now, I want you to imagine what the world would be like. And we do know, for example, that the billionaires have made money, right now there's like $6.7 trillion. Imagine a world where $5.3 trillion was reinvested, not by them, but by all the employees that helped made them that money, into launching Foundups. And of those, like I said, the money, what we're looking at, we're not trying to make money off. We're looking for that next Google. We're looking for that next Facebook. I believe, for example, Foundups Corp is like Berkshire Hathaway, or has the potential of Facebook or Google. Because all of a sudden, you have to imagine a new kind of business paradigm where we capture all the ideas before anyone else. Because why wouldn't you put your idea in a selfless model versus trying to get it going in a selfish model? Because and if you just want to look at the data, and Dave McClure will tell you, you've got to be a complete moron to do a startup because so few of them succeed. Most people don't realize there's 3 stages to a startup. There's the pre-seed stage, right, which is where 99% fail. Then you've got the seed stage. If you're fortunate enough to get into that stage, then you've got something like 80% fail, right? And then you got the VC stage, which I call the seeded stage. So it's the pre-seed, seed, and seeded. So what Foundups does is it takes away these stages, and it just basically says there's just one vehicle. And it's not about, for example, Foundups isn't about trying to make a few people money. It's about, for example, feeding your family. It's about, for example, picking up trash and then having a global community saying, yes, thank you, Mike, for helping to save the bees. I'll put in a penny to help towards that. And when you start scaling to what we have now, where we have 80% of the world online, then, Foundups become very viable because it's about, stopping the crisis or doing stuff that we can do as individuals. And we can't launch enough businesses. We can't produce enough nonprofits. We can't produce enough organizations. And we've proven this over the last 60 years. All the crises have gotten worse, not gotten better. So we need a business model that empowers the individual, and that's what Foundups does. It empowers the individual. Make the change.
So it's interesting because when I see the motivation of people getting into startups, from like founders to, the first employees to investors, one of the primary and incredibly powerful driving forces is ultimately selfish. The desire to cash in big time on the next new idea or hot product and company. So, what is the motivation for joining the Foundup system and launching a Foundup if the return is just making enough money to survive?
Well, it's not that, because it's play Foundups. The odds are, if you could if you could spend the next 10 years putting $1 in 1,000 ideas, okay, what are the odds one of those ideas will be a Facebook or a Google? And if, for example, I would have put $1 into Wikipedia. Wikipedia is a nonprofit because they couldn't find any investors. Everyone thought for example, it's stupid to go after MS Encarta. They were so heavily invested in, right? That was the Microsoft encyclopedia that launched in 1995. So the idea with Foundups is, number one is you're looking after, you're empowering people to do the things that are important to them. You're supporting as a global community those things. Like I said, I, for example, have launched 10 Foundups in the last 3 months. Okay, I've launched and funded. My garden is funded. That's feeding my kids. My permaculture farm is funded. That has helped me cover the basic costs of the permaculture farm, and I am developing new products. So I would say that the valuation of Michael Trout as an entrepreneur launching Foundups is significantly higher now that I have $700 a month coming in from my Foundups than I was when I first started. Does that make sense? I have the network, the people that are coming behind it. So what I want you to imagine now is imagine an open Y Combinator or open Techstars or an open think of it as an open incubator. Think of Foundups as an open incubator where anyone can place their ideas, anyone can fund those ideas, and ultimately anyone can trade those ideas, the stock or what I call stakes in those ideas, in an open decentralized stock market or stake market for Foundups. And it's kind of like a game. Think of it like a game. So do you think Michael Trout his garden Foundup is going to become a permaculture farm? Do you think, is he going to be able to transform, for example, another one is transforming our riverbank into kind of a food forest, which I've started doing. I'm practicing what I call probably eco-terrorism in the sense that I'm taking state land and I'm doing what I want with it. I don't care. They can arrest me, but I'm going to turn this grassland into food land, for the community. So I'm doing it as a Foundup, and I'm getting it funded as a Foundup. So Foundups are about following your passion, about doing the things that you're important for, and ultimately food security is going to be a very big issue in the future. So if you're not growing your own food, if you don't have access to clean water, in the next 10, maybe as early as 10, 20 years, you may be facing a crisis because those things can be significantly limited. And I got into permaculture only because I stepped away from Foundups to do permaculture because I wanted to secure food security. So I became a permaculture farmer only out of need, out of necessity for my family.
How many Foundups are currently on your platform? Right.
Well, I am testing it on Patreon because, to code out a platform and everything else takes significant amounts of money. It takes developers and everything else. So I'm using Patreon, which is for the artists. And they're the only never-ending crowdfunding solution. And I said, the moment they launched, I was like, great, I can start testing Foundups. I've got four or five other people doing their own Foundups. One guy's doing how to be happy Foundups. He's a French guy. It's all in French, but he does videos about happiness and everything else. I have another guy who's writing a book on startups and Foundups, and I have another guy who's also does farming and other things. So I'm trying to encourage people to think of anything that's beneficial to our planet, that it isn't motivated by necessarily, greed or that is more motivated for survival or for benefit, to think of that thing as a Foundup. And if it does level up, what we're committed to is I take 80% of the money that I raise and I redistribute it out into other Foundups. And I have that set up. I call it distributive crowdfunding, or I have that set up actually on a sliding scale. So when I get to 1,000 patrons on my on my patron page, it'll be 80%, but up to then it's distributed. It's actually, I'm distributing more than the percentage. So I'm encouraging other people to do Foundups and actually helping to get them going and working with them to do them.
So it sounds like you have about 15 Foundups on your platform right now, like the 10 that you started plus 5 other people's Foundups. Is that correct?
Sure. Well, I don't want to say platform because I'm using Patreon, which is their platform for launching artists. I'm hijacking it and using it for Foundups until I can get enough money. So we're currently coding out some of our platform. Ethereum, I don't know if you're familiar with Ethereum. It's probably going to be a good show for you to cover. Get one of the Ethereum guys to talk about it.
I'm not sure what Ethereum actually is. Can you explain?
Ethereum is basically a decentralized encrypted web. It's brand new. Basically, think of it as a new kind of web browser that is completely encrypted, and that you can create your own, well, like you do web pages, your own business models on it. And so you could become your own bank. You can remove the middleman. It's decentralized, so there's no middleman. So each node that you set up is kind of like a BitTorrent. It's all independent. It shares the data. It distributes the data. It's an amazing product. And ultimately, it's a product that I was needing in order to do Foundups, because you can't have a decentralized startup without having the platform to build it on. Does that make sense? You need to have that framework in place. So they're building that framework. It's still a little early. They raised $20 million to develop, and they have something called Ethereum, which is their own version of Bitcoin. So it's all tied into the whole Bitcoin space. It's built on Bitcoin, and it's definitely worth looking into. If you're listening to this, just type Ethereum, watch the talks. I've written a lot on it on LinkedIn. I've got a lot of posts that describe it.
Okay, so help me understand the Foundups ecosystem. So you have these founders who can then establish a Foundup within your open corporation network. Am I understanding this correctly?
Sure, you just put up your idea. So that a corporation is just a level. So if you think of it in levels, think of a Foundup starts at level 0 is your idea. The moment it gets validated, and validated means someone likes it, someone supports it, someone follows. That's all forms of validation, social media validation. The Foundup then levels up and goes through different stages. And basically think of it as kind of a project management stage. Like, here's stage 1, I've got to do this. And then when you get to stage, or let's think level 5, all of a sudden, okay, you've qualified now to become a subsidiary of our entity. You don't need to incorporate. You don't need anything. Boom. You get access to banking, get your own credit card, you get everything, everything gets, boom, done for you. No cost whatsoever for you. It comes out of it comes out of what you've raised. You're going to pay for these services at cost from the crowdfunding and other services that you have. Play Foundups doesn't exist, so what I'm describing to you is theoretical in the business model. So you can't go, I just want to be clear, you can't go somewhere and see this in action. If you go to foundups.com, you can see, I've put in all the documents, all the data, or in one place, so you can get a better understanding of it.
Okay, wait. So I'm a little unclear. So it sounds, is this theoretical or is it actually happening? Or do you mean that it's theoretical in that it's currently happening on another platform, which you mentioned?
Sure, I'm testing it on Patreon. Okay, right? I'm testing it on Patreon. Right. So I'm testing it on Patreon because I couldn't test whether Foundups could be launched unless I had never-ending crowdfunding. Well, now there is never-ending crowdfunding. It's for the arts. I'm testing it. So now with that tested, the first thing I need to do is build a validation engine. So that's called FX. So right now we've got FX pretty much coded to 70%. We're alpha testing it. It's a social media, like I said, referral, valuation, validation engine. So it will sit in Facebook. It's going to sit on Pinterest. It's going to sit all over. So if you've got Chrome, if you've got, you'll be able to download the extension, and all of a sudden you're going to see FX. So in order for us to validate Foundups, we needed an engine to do that. In order for us to kind of, let's say, mine our Foundups, we need this product. So Foundups is a very early. Think of Foundups as hardware. Think of Ethereum as the software, and then think of Play Foundups as the connector between the two. Does that make sense?
Kind of. Still, because it's obviously like a paradigm shifting model, so to speak. So
it is.
Again, as you mentioned, it's like describing Wikipedia before it existed. So I'm just trying to understand the ecosystem. So you have the founders creating Foundups, and then you have the funders, and are those funders effectively investors that then receive shares in Foundups that they can redeem?
Sure, they get staked. Right. So we have something called Foundup dollars. And Foundup dollars, think of Foundup dollars as Bitcoin. So the moment you put a Foundup dollar into a Foundup, basically that Foundup dollar becomes a stake in it.
Okay, so you invest real money and you get Foundup dollars in return?
So basically, yeah. So the way it's going to work is you will basically we will take your worthless dollars and give you Foundup dollars, right? We'll take anything. We'll take Bitcoin, no matter what. We're no matter what currency you have out there, if it's part of the currency, depending on the market. Again, it's going to be dictated by the market. It's decentralized. So the market's going to tell you how much they will give you Foundup dollars for $1, for example, or take.
So what's the exchange rate? A U.S. dollar for a Foundup dollar?
Well, right now I have it set for 100 to 1 right now. Okay,
so you go to Foundup dollars to $1 US dollar.
Correct.
Okay,
Correct.
And what can I buy with Foundup dollars once I've made that currency conversion? So
what happens is, again, right now what I'm doing is crediting folks Foundup dollars that you'll be able to use on our apps and other things. Kind of like how Ethereum, if you buy Ethereum right now, they raised $20 million selling Ethereum, but you can't do anything with that Ethereum. So it's kind of the same situation. What you'll be able to do with Foundup dollars is you will have something called, think of it as a decentralized Craigslist, where people will be able to put whatever it is they have. Let's say I have an old tractor, I've got this, I got that. You'll be able to put it up on what I call the Foundup Mall, and you'll be able to purchase, using your Foundup dollars, those things. Now, what's going to happen is, as you put money into Foundups, those Foundup dollars are actually going to churn and increase in value as that Foundup increases. So as that Foundup levels up, so will your initial investment. Well, you're going to see something, I want to buy this, I want to get that. You're going to exit out of that Foundup, and someone's going to basically, you're going to say, hey, I've got these stakes in Michael's permaculture farm available. Someone will say, oh, you know what? I think that's going to go further. I think I've been following Michael and I want to get into that. So he'll buy, he will basically buy your Foundup dollars off you, and then you'll be able to basically then use that money or use that stake that now goes back into Foundup dollars into purchasing anything you want. So think of it in the same extent of
marketplace. So you can buy tangible goods listed in the Foundup marketplace, like
right, and it's tax free. It's like we don't pay. It's a decentralized exchange. Again, we don't make anything. We just kind of like Bitcoin. Imagine BitTorrent market. So it's like, imagine like everything you see in a BitTorrent, like these downloads. Think of those as instead of a download. Yeah, right. Think of it as like, there's tomatoes, or here's this, or here's that, or you'll be able to just type in, it's going to be autonomous. It's going to know exactly, like when you log in, it's going to know what's around you. It's going to, like, this is what's available within a 20-mile radius or so on. So this will plug into all these established or building, networks, this open farm network and everything else that we're going to fit into. So ultimately, it becomes a way for folks to invest in their community, invest in projects and Foundups that then level up, that then produce goods, that then can be distributed locally or within your network. And some of those, just like regular startups, will step in it big. And if you're fortunate enough to have $1 or into one of those projects, you're going to be very happy. And then what happens is those individuals, I have a term for them, I call them archangels, they turn around and all of a sudden you have this snowball effect. So the moment we have one successful Foundup, that can turn around and launch more, then it's going to be a never-ending. I mean, it's the snowball is going down the hill. All it takes is one.
So let me I'm trying to grasp this. So currently, right now, what do you have available in terms of tangible goods for sale in your Foundup marketplace?
So right now, I have people who are patrons of Foundups.com can get my products that I make. So I make herb sweetener, I make yogurt, I make all this different. Now, obviously, I only make some of my products available to local. So to the folks, I already have, in a way, I teach English in Japan, so I have my own parents, and I have them buying Foundup dollars as a coupon that they use for my English classes, and they also use for buying products. So I make all these really cool organic herb yogurts, and I go and fetch mountain spring water and add herbs. So I make all this, all these amazing organic products that I make available to them. For those who are outside, the only product that I actually have as an international product is a herb sweetener, which is basically a GMO-free sweetener that can be used to make herb yogurts, can be used in there, whatever. It can be used as a syrup or whatever. And I have videos on how to make and everything else. My goal is I want other people to make herb sweetener. I want to create the herb sweetener brand, which is as big as Coca-Cola. But unlike Coca-Cola, it's owned by the people, for the people, as Foundups. So, imagine seeing the brand herb sweetener, recognizing it, and then that product is actually made locally and distributed locally. I think is a really cool idea. I mean, I know that's not a unique idea but I'm taking it kind of to Foundups as providing as an example. So if you want herb sweetener, you have two options. Number one is you can become a patron, and I'll send you some, and I'll send you seeds with it, and then and I'll show you how to make it, right? And you can start making and use the labeling and the branding and everything else that as a social network that we're creating for the brand.
Well, so it's interesting because it seems like, the value of the Foundup currency is going to really depend on the evolution and the breadth of how quickly your marketplace develops. Like right now with Bitcoin, I can pretty much buy anything with Bitcoin. But it seems like right now with your marketplace, what's available is locally, a sourced yogurt or your herb sweetener. So how long do you think it's going to take before Foundup dollars are going to be able to be redeemed on a much broader scale? Because from an investor's point of view, if I were to invest in Foundups, I'm essentially getting digital currency that I can't necessily use until the rest of your marketplace catches up. So I'm trying to figure out
you're getting more than that. You're actually you're getting shares in the corporation too. So you get we're a C corporation, but I'm gifting my shares. We are gifting 2 million shares of Foundups Corp. And all our shares in an open corporation, or P2P open corporation, all shares, number one, are voting. Number two, no one can own more than 10,000 shares, and they're non-dilutable to that cap. So if you put a penny in and you get shares, every time we issue more shares, it's going to basically non-dilute till you hit that cap. So right now, the investment for anyone who wants to support the vision of Foundups, the whole idea is, number one is you'll get Foundup dollars that you'll be able to apply in our marketplace in the future. You have to understand, Bitcoin 4 years ago was worth nothing, and you could get 1,500 Bitcoin for $1, and it didn't have a marketplace. So we're kind of like where Bitcoin was in 2010. And it's funny enough, I actually came up with the idea of Foundup dollars at the same time or around the same time Bitcoin, but I didn't use Foundup dollars only because I was like, I don't want to confuse people. Oh, this Bitcoin, people are starting to talk about this Bitcoin. So I in the diagrams you'll see me using Bitcoin. So in answering your question, it's going to come down to, number one is how soon or when I can raise the seed capital in order to code out the platform. Now, my hope is I believe, for example, Foundups extension FX has a potential of being a self-sustaining, its own viral product, something like Twitter, something like I don't know if you know Buffer or RightTag. These are friends of mine startups. I believe FX has a potential to change the web just like Twitter did. And if I'm right in this assumption, then all of a sudden think of FX as its own little Foundup within Foundups, could become a vehicle that's going to provide the revenue to help develop. What I'm trying to develop is to the scope of what Google's developed with Google Docs and so on and so on. There's a lot of modules to it, and there's going to take time and effort. How I see it is that things are only going to get worse on our planet. The vision of Foundups is simple. It's individual driven, and people can start launching them now on Patreon, and I will work with them one-on-one to help them with their Foundup. And it's just a matter of time before people realize that our current business model is where the problem lies, and that the only way to save our planet is to change it, and we need to have, transform it. So to answer your question, it takes, it's up to the global community and the money that we can raise. If I can find someone who would put, $1 million into Foundups, I would say you'd have a marketplace within 6 months. If it's going to take me 5 years to raise that $1 million, then, we're looking at 5 years from now. So it's out of my control. All I could do is kind of be the messenger and saying, listen, I've got it all ready to code. I've got it all ready to go. All I'm missing is capital. So when the capital comes, we will develop it. And that's the crux with all of it.
Have you thought about trying to get into Y Combinator on this one?
I approached Y Combinator in 2000. Understand, Foundups is not new. I've been doing Foundups since 2010. I went down the Y Combinator. I went down the Techstars. I went down all these different things. And what I realize is this, I am the end game to the startup. If I am right, I kill the startup. I kill the Y Combinator business model. I kill the accredited investor business model, right? I change it all. It's kind of like how Wikipedia changed it all for Encarta. So why would someone invest in something that destroys their cake? No, they wouldn't. And it took me basically 4 years to realize that. The only way Foundups is going to happen, in my view, is number one, if I'm fortunate enough to find an investor who is selfless and says, you know what, let's give Mike a chance. And he understands the crisis at hand and said, I'm willing to try anything to save our planet. And, let's put in some money into Foundups and see if Michael's right. Or number two, where people finally get fed up, if I can get the Occupy Wall Street, because we changed the whole system. You have to understand, if Foundups replace the startup, we say bye-bye to lobbyists. We say bye-bye to all these politicians who are taking money, because Foundup corporations cannot give to lobbying. They cannot give to that. So the moment people start grasping that all of the problems facing our society stems from this business model, and that Trout has this alternative business model that launches an alternative corporation which is built on the existing. Nothing changes. All that changes is the bylaws and the articles. We don't have to change any laws. We just basically change the way that all these future entities start. And, I've raised a lot of money for nonprofits, and nonprofits as a whole, we could spend an hour talking about nonprofits. I used to work, raising capital for them. Nonprofits, are not needed. We don't really need nonprofit. We can set up, like I said, Foundups are all about for profit. We just take 80% and we put it back into the system. So it's like having, it's like Google taking 80% of their net profits in order to fund more Googles. No, that their investors are too selfish. They don't want to do that. They want to take 80% of the net profits and fund their greedy lifestyle. So, and when people realize we don't need this 1% to be successful businesses, we don't need them anymore. And that's kind of like we're flies in a jar that's had our lid on, right? And all of a sudden our lid has come off in the last 4 years with crowdfunding, right? The lid has come off, but all the flies are still in the jar thinking they can't leave the jar. I'm a fly, right? And what I'm trying to do is say, listen, we can leave the jar. We can save the planet. We can change everything. But we need to step away and step away from the selfish model and embrace a selfless one.
Wow. So I really admire your visionary approach to business. So can you let us know, how can we stay in touch with your work and get involved in Foundups?
Foundups.com. So Foundups.com, I got rid of my website. I was like, what the heck do I have a website for? So I have it now pointing to Patreon. And when we launch, the first thing that we're going to launch is this decentralized Craigslist for Foundup dollars. And the reason why I say Foundups.com is because in the future, Foundups.com will point to our own platform. And in the future, you'll be able to play Foundups app. And, you can actually start testing. We're an open corporation, so anyone who becomes a patron of Foundups get access to all of my IP, as long as they agree to launch it as a Foundup. So I am completely open, but the requirement is, hey, if you will put $1 into this, I will open up my books to you. Anyone could be part of Foundups Corp. So you go to foundups.org, that's our LinkedIn organization. You could see all the members that we have. Anyone can join Foundups Corp. Can I join Google? No, but you can join Foundups Corp.
Okay, thank you so much. I look forward to your masterclass on how we can successfully tap into the power of perpetual crowdfunding in order to launch our world-changing Foundups. So, folks, if you want to access that masterclass, that would be at entrepreneursforachange.com/58. Thank you so much for your time, Michael, and you have a beautiful evening.
Thanks a lot. It's been wonderful.
Thanks, folks, for listening to the Entrepreneurs for a Change podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please help us reach more people with inspiring stories like this one by giving us a 5-star rating in iTunes. If this podcast inspires you to join the movement of change-making entrepreneurs, we'd love to give you a jumpstart with our free Business Changemakers Toolkit, which you can download at www.entrepreneursforachange.com/join. If you have a changemaker in mind you'd love for us to interview, go to entrepreneursforachange.com/suggest and tell us who and why. Finally, feel free to stop by facebook.com/entrepreneursforachange to share your thoughts and say hello.